A whopping 70% of a visitor would abandon the checkout flow after adding an item to the cart. If you are a D2C founder, you absolutely dread this metrics. But you know there are specific ways using which you can improve your checkout conversion by almost 35%. And this is exactly what we are discussing today with Rebecca Hugo. She's a senior UX auditor with Baymart Institute. My name is Girdhari Saran. I'm your host at the 10x Marketer podcast. Today's episode is filled with some great insights and value bumps which you would love to implement. If you are a D2C founder, I would suggest you don't miss even a second. Watch this episode end to end. If you know someone who is running a D2C brand, share this episode link with them. They will surely come back and thank you for doing this. Before we jump into the conversation with Rebecca, make sure you subscribe and follow the 10x Marketer podcast on your favorite channel. We are available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. So let's join Rebecca and rock your checkout conversions.
Hi, Gary. Thank you so much for having me today. So, my name is Rebecca Hugo. I currently work at Baymard Institute. I've been there since 2018. It's getting on quite a while now. My personal background, I have a little bit of background in psychology. My first foray into UX was actually due to the fact that I was quality control at a digital agency years ago. And I found myself getting into more often arguments with the developers, for example, about, well, yes, you've built it that way, but does the user understand it? Can the user realize what's going on? They knew, of course, because they built it. They could, what I refer to, they could white box the whole thing. So they knew the input, they knew the output, and they knew the little mechanics in the middle. But users don't know that. And what's fascinating about UX is the simple fact of obvious isn't obvious. Our understanding of how a website should work, what a website should do. I mean, the average person spends quite a lot of time on the internet in general. We spend more than that because it's our business. So expecting users to understand things the same level that we do doesn't make sense. So I eventually started shifting into usability to get that understanding and help and advocate for the user. Couple of other agencies, industries, and things like that. And then I ended up at Baymard, which I am at now. So Baymard are independent web usability institute. We've been going since 2009. And in that time, we've conducted over 130,000 hours of large-scale independent web usability research. And all of that is concentrated down into the single actionable guidelines to try and help the average site, the average user to use a website. And there are a whole series of the guidelines that we have that become air quotes obvious. Well, of course, a website should do that, but then it gets shocking with our benchmark sites that we look at, which are in the 200s at this point. So case studies that we've looked at across the US and Europe. How many sites still don't align with this because obvious isn't always obvious. So yeah, I've very much been an advocate for the user experience, for the user, trying to make sure that they get their voices out as best as possible, and through those best practices we're seeing more and more at Baymard. So I'm very lucky personally with where I am here and being able to help sites advocate for the users themselves.
Awesome, Rebecca. So it's really great to have you today. And my first question to you is in your research, almost 70% people abandon the cart. What are the few most pressing reasons why people leave item in cart and do not complete their purchase?
What gets really interesting about the cart abandonment, checkout abandonment stats is point one is what are actually your users using a cart for. Whilst many users are using it to obviously put things in your basket and then going to go pay for it, there's a subset of users that are using it for different reasons, like a comparison tool. So some users are using that because there isn't another option. Many wish lists or those save list items available on certain sites, they're actually account walled, so users can't benefit from them. So a comparison feature, a saved feature, a storage tool. So the cart itself is actually being used for a multitude of reasons. So specifically, cart abandonment doesn't tell the story of positive or negative user experience specifically. However, What we are seeing is this checkout abandonment. So what happens when a user begins their checkout flow? And so, just as you said, Gary, we've got with our current statistics, and we've looked at hundreds of websites and we've looked at plenty of different statistics available. We are seeing that 70% of users are abandoning their checkout experience. The most common reason is coming in about 42% is that users just aren't ready to check out. So like I said, we've got that comparability, we've got that comparison, we've got that storage essence, we've got that, oh, I need to remember that later, but I'm on a bus, I'm going to go back to you, mentalities and so on. So you can lead the horse to water, you can't make them drink. That's fine. So we're going to put that 42% to one side. When we break down the remaining numbers, there are a series of values and a series of reasons that are either in a site's control or not. So there are reasons regarding, say, too high costs and fees. A website, to a point, can obviously control it because they're setting their website cost and fees. But at the same time, there's a reason they've set them that way. So again, we're going to put those sort of values to one side. The remaining, say, 7 or so reasons really come down to usability. So how that checkout is designed, how form fields are being presented to users, how information is being presented to users, physical options that are available, etc. Of these, my personal favorite one, because it looks so silly and it's such a silly thing to think about when it comes down to it, it's 22% of users abandon a website due to the fact of a too long or complicated checkout process. On top of those, we've got things like third-party payments weren't available, or their preferred payments weren't available to them. They couldn't understand the full cost of their order, etc., and so on. So there are these whole big series of different reasons why a user would abandon checkout. But one of the most pertinent ones, and definitely something a site can control, is the fact that the actual process is too complicated.
Okay, so you have been on a mission to simplify the checkout process, and there are some specific guidelines or some checkout guidelines that can really help somebody improving their checkout process. Uh, would you mind list some of the most important guidelines for our users?
Yeah, of course. So to caveat, there's a couple of things here. So point one, checkout complication is an interesting factor in and of itself. What we saw for a while that was popping up in quite a few sites with quite a few different theories, I suppose, was steps versus fields. So there is a belief that complication comes into how many pages, for example, a user is experiencing. So we've experienced those one-step checkouts, we've experienced checkouts with 14 steps. Current average is bringing us to about 5 steps for the average checkout. So obviously not including those one-step checkouts, which seem to have become less in vogue recently in comparison to previous years. But don't want to concentrate on that specifically. So a user's complication or perceived complication or length of checkout isn't related to those physical pages. What we are constantly seeing and very consistently seeing is that there is a complication perception when it comes to fields. So we're talking about any physical box that appears on a page that a user has to interact with or appears to have to interact with, which is another fun point. And that's the level of confusion or complication that the users are getting to. Worst case scenario, we're seeing 16, maybe even 20 form fields. Best air quotes case scenario, that can be brought all the way back down to 6. With this, I'm really pushing like standard B2C, those common purchase sort of sites. So I'm not talking about finance, I'm not talking about travel, I'm not talking about anything where there's a whole big series of other fields that are very necessary in order to complete for either legal purposes or simply the fact of this information is necessary. But that's not necessarily needed when you're buying a t-shirt, when you're buying a laptop or a new phone or a pair of jeans and things of that nature. So everything I'm really going to concentrate when we talk about things today, Gary, is going to be on those air quotes standard average e-commerce sites, which are buying things that you don't need a degree to really get away with and fill out, and those sort of levels of complication and so on. So we really want to concentrate on the number of physical form fields when we are talking about these. So that complication level comes from that. So our most recent study, when it comes to when we're looking at checkouts, we're looking at maybe roughly an average of 11 form fields for the majority of checkouts. Again, that can go all the way up to 16 to 20. It can go all the way down to 6, but average site at the moment is playing around with something like 11 or so form fields. But this could actually be as few as 7 with some optimization tweaks and some understandings of how users are utilizing a checkout, interacting with these points, etc. So what I'm going to really initially concentrate on now is when we talk about that slightly severe scenario, those 16 possible fields that we can actually and typically do see in many sites, though it may not be the average of 11, how can we optimize that for the average user? So anytime a user is going into a checkout, they are confronted with fields. Simple put, guest checkout, having to fill in this varying pieces of information. Understandable, otherwise we don't get our thing, they don't get their money, no worries. So a user spends typically a disproportionate amount of attention on any open form field, whether it's required or whether it's not. Anytime a field is open, they have to attend to it, they have to work out what is necessary from them, if they even have to fill it out, and so on. So what we're saying is when we go into a checkout and there are 16 things, there are 16 tasks at hand, there are things to do whenever we're experiencing a checkout with a form field. So all of these are vying for attention. We've got our first name, our last name, our email, our phone, address line 1, address line 2, maybe a company name, a city, a state or a county or a region, a postal code, a country, depending on who's being shipped to, coupon codes, credit card numbers, security codes, passwords, and a repeat password. That's roughly 16. I don't like saying them out loud because it gets exhausting, but we're experiencing those bits. Yes, they're chunked. Yes, they're broken down, but these are individual things that I have to put my mind to in order to complete. And caveat again, we're talking really about guest checkout users. Repeat customers, hooray. They're going to most likely, fingers crossed, they're going to have this information saved. Wonderful. But we are seeing still consistently across Baymard's testing that the average user doesn't want to have to create an account. So we are looking from that kind of organic guest checkout experience. So there is a possibility, and there is an ability and a capability and all these wonderful words to condense this checkout experience down, to make it less of a cognitive load on the user, help them through. And also every form field is an opportunity for a mistake or an opportunity for an error. We were discussing this a little while ago. So I have a lovely plaster on my finger. I can't type for anything right now. I don't know why. I don't even use this finger this much for typing, but even so, my entire hand doesn't seem to work properly. So if you think about this and the other ways that we interact with anything, we are erroneous people. We are likely to make mistakes. We're fallible. Hooray for us. So let's try and minimize those sort of sections and pieces as well by minimizing those points of failure, as it were, with those forms.
Awesome. So I think that pretty much answered this question. Now the next question is, when you talk about checkout experience, there are two ways of analyzing this. One is the mobile checkout or checkout on your mobile phone, which even has a smaller screen as compared to laptop, versus the checkout screen on laptops. So is there any difference in the overall experience, abandon rate, when it comes to mobile versus desktop?
Nothing that we're currently seeing in Baymard's testing. Majority of Baymard's guidelines are actually platform agnostic. What that basically comes down to is that a user is experiencing the core of the issue across platforms, whether that is mobile web, whether that's mobile app, whether that's desktop, etc. There are those inherent nuances and limitations, just as you said, screen availability, real estate, hover effects, how specific you can be, because obviously there's no mouse cursor, and again, bum hands, inability to be that specific, and so on. So the overall experience is fairly consistent with our current numbers. What does change is where a site can make optimization better for those users. Mobile specifically, we can really lean into mobile optimization when it comes to keyboards. So I'm not going to pretend I'm a developer. I'm not going to pretend my code is up to scratch by any means. But my base knowledge does say that you can make a field trigger a specific keyboard because it needs specific entry points. I think that's hopefully common knowledge at the very least. So when we're leaning into those moments of consistency, touch optimized keyboards. I want to input a number. This telephone number is only ever going to be numbers. Get my big number pad out. If I have a little keyboard that I then have to switch, or the little numbers across the top, that doesn't help me none, especially, again, don't have a working finger right now. Same ability when it comes with, say, email addresses. We need an @ symbol. We need a full stop, a period, however you want to call it. Because we know we need them, let's manifest them. Let's get them on those keyboards. So even though there is this ability for sites to optimize these keyboards, help users complete this content, and hopefully, air quotes, avoid these error moments as well, 65% of sites in our current benchmarks are still having issues with this consistency of employing relevant keyboards. There are two other ones that always not exactly surprise me, but it's very interesting when it comes to perception. So one specifically is about disabling auto-capitalization on email. There are a subset of users that still believe, rightly or wrongly so, that email addresses are case sensitive. So what we saw in testing is that if a site auto-capitalizes an email field, the user will physically go back and retype their email address so they can get rid of that capital letter at the very front of it, citing concerns about failure of delivery for emails or not being able to create right accounts, like case sensitivity, etc. So whether that is a correct or incorrect really doesn't matter when it comes to that perception and comfort. So leaning into that and simply decapitalizing it. Nice and straightforward, and then helps those users progress. The numbers aren't as bad here. 35% of our benchmark sites at Baymard aren't leaning into this. My final optimization really point for mobile is making sure that the autocorrect with weak dictionaries specifically is disabled. Weak dictionaries, in our real definition, comes to addresses, names, things that are, in the nicest way to all of us, made up. How I spell my name specifically is one variation. So Rebecca. I know KAHs, I know 1Cs, I spell Becca with 1C, I know 2Cs, I know Ys, I know Hs. There are so many different ways of spelling anything. And then we can start looking into the same principles with addresses, with email addresses. Not everything that we write are dictionary words. So when there are these auto-correction moments here, it actually detrimental to the average user. It's either annoying, is in the factor of, well, that's not my name, I have to go back and fix it. Or in some very severe cases, it can really run the risk of users not receiving their product at all. So if they've actually typed in, it's been recorrected to, no, I can't think of words today, chestnut versus chest hatch. I don't know. But what we do run the risk of is users not being able to receive their products because the postman, the mailman, can't send that item out, or maybe there is a difficulty in some dispatch area somewhere else. But there are those complications that are, as far as my little brain really understands it, a code shift or a code change that is low cost enough, but still impactful enough to alleviate these issues. And yet 90% of sites in our benchmark database don't turn off this autocorrect nature for elements that could actually be detrimental for the average user. So doubling back, when it comes to those differences, average flow, really not so much. Users need the visibility, they need to understand it. Real estate becomes that much more important, so ensuring that don't rely on elements that are going to be reviewing the entire page, concentrate on really what's going to be available in those viewports, and then optimize those keyboards, optimize those layouts to make sure the user is seeing what they need to see when they see it, but also can actually use the interface that's been provided to them.
Awesome. So another important question that is quite related to the checkout field data, this is the coupon code. And there's a lot of data, there's a lot of controversy about having or not having a field to enter the coupon code information. Is there any specific pointers in your research that help us understand what is the importance of having versus not having a field for entering a coupon on the checkout page?
If the website in and of itself offers coupon codes, offers gift codes, anything that a user can type in, enter, and receive money off, receive a bonus, whatever it happens to be, then it is fundamentally important that that is offered for a user. Otherwise, the user is being, I suppose, tantalized or teased with the possibility of this 10%, but they don't know how to reply it. They don't know how to get that back. So the essence of it is useful. And when Baymods testing has shown nothing to say that one should or should not have the availability or the offering of a coupon code, not specifically. What we are seeing is actually two small things. So one, outside of some of our checkout information that we were going to go through today, but one of them is actually when it's appropriate, auto-apply these discounts. So as soon as the user has actually met particular parameters, throw that coupon straight in for them. Users don't have to then think about it, go hunting, remember where it was, where they found it. Quite often with many sites, these coupon codes, there's multiples of them for a start, but where they were presented to the user, where they can find it again, have they copied and pasted it, have they erased it, etc. So where possible, do the work for the user. General recommendation on the whole for any website. Do what work you can, alleviate for the user. The second part of it is, whilst users do benefit from it, if a site makes it too obvious, and typically this basically means having the form field open by default, then there is a subset of users that we're seeing in testing that will go out of their way. And by this, we mean literally leaving the website. They go coupon hunting. They're looking at this field and going, I could get a discount, but I'm currently not. Let's see if I can. And they'll just leave. They may keep the tab open or the window open, what have you, but they will go off and try and work out whether there is a coupon that could be applied. And more sites are having this availability. There are extensions for browsers that will pre-fill it, etc., and so on. The risk of this is two things. One, some user could feel a bit sore about not being able to get their discount and then not go back. Some user in their research could actually find a better deal, air quotes, nothing wrong with the original deal, of course, but a more optimal deal elsewhere and not come back to the site. Some users will give up. Some users may use internet connection. All these things that, again, could be avoided by simply collapsing the field. And if there is any concerns about, well, if we collapse it, they won't see it, our eye tracking data isn't showing that. And we see similar things with being able to optimize and minimize those visible form fields by default, such as address line 2, such as coupon codes, such as company name. So our eye tracking data studies are still showing that users will attend to it. Their eyes will still scan over. They'll go, nope, don't want you, and they'll move on. The interaction point is still there. So the user can open it if they want to, but it's not teasing them in quite the same way as if it was open by default. And when it comes to something like address line 2, which is confusing terribly for the average user, I don't have an address line 2. I don't know what I would put in it, even if I did. Even if you provide the information for it, many users still get confused by it. B2C sites, why would a company name being asked? So again, we've got those distraction points. We can minimize those. So just collapsing them, providing them as links. They can be opened, they can be interacted with, but they're choices rather than forced attention.
So I'm quite surprised by you frequently mentioning the company name. How many websites owners are still asking for the company name in a B2C checkout process? Because I don't think it's really important for any region.
Not typically. The numbers have progressively gone down over the years, if I am remembering correctly. And now you're forcing me to double check my numbers, so thank you very much, Hugh. But typically, the company name field isn't as aggressive, shall we say, as it was. Same principle with actually avoid or clarifying address type selection, which used to happen for a while as well. I'm going to terribly embarrass myself. I will get you that value and you can update the information for me at a later date. But it is fewer. But there are these B2C sites that may have just left over from other legacy data, or in some cases, we are seeing those B2C and B2B sites. So there are those series of sites that will offer to trade as well as your average user. Maybe they are recycling their checkout flow. So there could be risks with those elements. Yeah, the commonality is definitely not there in comparison to 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's making sure that we're still avoiding unnecessary distraction.
Awesome. And in your research so far, Is there any specific data to point out the difference between abandon rate for paid versus organic traffic?
Nothing with our current data. So we can't guarantee that there is a difference between paid traffic, organic traffic, if someone is even picking up their cart partway through. We do have some information from some people that we speak with regarding the how a user is progressing through their purchase. So various purchases will be one and done. I land, I find, I buy. Others are repeat. So larger items or more expensive items, we could be visiting the site 6 times and then committing to a purchase, etc. But Baymar's research can capture either eventuality. So whether it is an organic experience, we land on the website, we go all the way through and go to the checkout, or we land partway through, etc. So Baymar's research can actually support either instance, but the current data that we have doesn't give us anything to say that there are more problems with one journey or another, or whether there are any specific or more specific things to really pay attention to regards to either.
So one of the striking thing about the research that you shared with me is that almost 26% of the user would abandon the cart because they have difficulty in account creation, or they have the site is asking them to create an account. So, and obviously the site owner needs the information in a correct order, only then they can ship your item on time, right? So that's in a way necessary and important for the buyer also. They need to provide the right information. According to you, what a site owner can really do to minimize the friction here? Is there a way to delay the account creation process so that you don't have that much abandonment in the process?
Absolutely. So what we do see with our testing at Baymard is that if account creation is offered or presented or forced, if it's forced, then many users will, like you've just said, they'll abandon entirely because they just don't want to. They just don't want to keep creating passwords and giving their information away. Fine. There are a series of users that do want that. But when that information is asked for upfront, so you've gone to your cart, you've added things in, you've gone to the next step, maybe an account selection page where it has a guest checkout option, it has an sign in option, or account creation option. When account creation is available in this beginning step, many users will then associate everything that comes after it as an account creation step rather than a checkout step. Whether that's true or not, again, doesn't matter. We've got these very fascinating perception pieces, and obvious isn't always obvious. What we know, white boxing, black boxing, understanding input and outputs. Putting, again, all that to one side. What we do know is that this perception exists. So to avoid this and avoid this unnecessary friction point, allow the user to get their job done, which is literally checking out, and in the crassest way, giving you their money so they can get their thing. Let them get that done. And so at the end of this process, it's this little reminder of, oh, by the way, if you create a password or click this box, we can save that. And then the rest of that information is then created for them. At the end of the day, the account creation process in its simplest form, one, maybe two fields. One, email address or a telephone number, and then maybe they'll win you over an OTP. Otherwise, many sites are still leaning into passcodes. We've got no data to say either is good, either is bad, but that's just the facts of where we are. So creating an account is two fields. Information that is relevant for account creation, that's still two fields. Information a site might want, that might be many more fields. So it's finding that balance between the two. So the site, again, is doing the heavy lifting. It's done all the work for the user because it's been able to capture all of this for them and for the site itself. And then the user goes, yeah, actually, I will do that. Two fields, one and done, away we go. What's important is to allow the user the knowledge for this upfront. So do you want to continue as a guest? You can create an account later if you like. So that's nice and present for them. And then allowing them to sign in or just continue the guest checkout. And then where this exists, so the confirmation page, don't interrupt the user while they're still trying to get through their primary role, their primary job, which is buying the thing or things that they are interested in. So delayed account creation is available, or should be ideally available. It does definitely have its benefits, and hopefully it captures those best of both worlds scenarios of getting all the great information that the site might want, but also utilizing all of that information that the user has actually already provided. So cutting down unnecessary work, unnecessary form fields again.
Awesome. So one more pointers I picked up from your research is that almost 18% people or the users would abandon the cart because they don't trust the website with their credit card information. What can site owners do to reduce this friction?
There are a whole subset of users that are really leaning into the fact of third party payment methods, for example. So some sites do actively prefer these third party payment methods because of not always a distrust, but data security, convenience, audit issues. They know that they can be protected by a third party provider in comparison to maybe their credit card. This is a fairly common one. Pardon my misspoke. This can be common when it comes to international purchases. There are also the risks, the fact of these credit card instances can also be declined. So a user might not actually be able to use, say, Baymart is a Danish company. Can I use a Danish credit card if I'm trying to purchase from a US specific site, or a UK specific site, a German specific site, etc.? And truth be told, there have been various instances in our testing, in our benchmarking, in actually our audits with some of our clients, where we can't use our Danish cards to purchase on specific sites because they are actually locked down to their own countries. So if we're on a US site, there's no option to fill out correct billing address information with a Danish card. So when we do have those imitation pieces as well as offering those options.
Almost 16% of people say that they can't see their cost upfront. They don't know how much they would be charged. So maybe you can talk about specific actions or steps a site owner can take to reduce this specific type of fraction on their website, on their checkout process.
Certainly. So one of the initial steps of this is the card itself. So we have a series of guidelines from Baymar's experience and Baymar's testing to make sure the users not only know what it is that they're paying, but what that breakdown looks like. There are some countries that will separate tax with the base product. The UK, for example, they can include the tax cost within the main product cost. So if it says £20, I'm going to be handing over £20. There's no other extra money in there. The US, for example, that's tax dependent, that's state dependent, that will be necessarily different. So if I see 20 USD, then there's a tax on top of that. Some users, obviously, they live there, they expect it, they do understand that that is the capabilities there. Other users will struggle with those tax elements, they'll struggle with shipping elements, they'll struggle with extra fees. Home and decor, for example, if I'm buying a lamp, probably going to be fairly straightforward because it can be thrown into the back of, gently placed into the back of a mail van, and away we go. If I'm buying a sofa, if I'm buying a bed, that will typically have maybe a large furniture charge on top of it. If I don't know about this upfront, I suddenly have this surprise, an extra $100 moment, which completely ruins the budget. So cart, when we're looking at those moments, making sure that individual cost items are as clear as possible, making sure that total cost items are also there as well, so users can understand those comparisons. Upfront, or at least estimates about what the likelihood of shipping, if there are hidden fees, what those breakdowns of fees are. These become more important in more specific industries such as travel, including flight, including hotel bookings and things like that. If the price for rental of a room is £200, but I'm paying a total order cost of £260, where is this number coming from? What have I not been told in this? I'm not going to ship anything to me. It's a room rental. I'm going to go to you. So where is this value coming from? So breaking down those fees, being as explicit as possible. And if those finite fees can't be provided early on in the process, then saying as such. This is an estimate. This is subject to change, but there is a likelihood on average, etc. So the user still gets that expectation of there's probably going to be an extra £50 here that will be accounted for in these ways. Oh, look, it's gone down by 2%, it's gone up by 5%. Okay, I can expect that. So making sure that there are those moments in the process, appropriately so, that the user is actually getting a realistic understanding. This also helps as another point with shipping thresholds. So, is a user reaching a free shipping threshold? Are they already in a free shipping threshold? So, communicating those points, those benefit points for the user. So, the user doesn't have to hunt. The user doesn't want to hunt. The user shouldn't have to hunt for this information. Again, let the website do the heavy lifting, let them do the work for the user. So concentrating those moments on the cart, making sure that there is that really visible breakdown. Order cost summaries during multi-step checkout flows or accordion flows as well, so that update. So if they do pick shipping option A versus B, that reflection is happening there, that transparency is nice and there for them as well. Just so consistently that user isn't going, surprise, you're out of budget. Just having the ability to know what they're getting themselves into, I suppose. So cart order summaries, if there is going to be a change, telling them, alerting that user that there is that change or an expectation to change. Just don't hide from them, really, more than anything else.
Awesome. So you have studied thousands of checkout pages, checkout flows so far. What are some of the common mistakes that you see, and you get surprised? Why is it still there? Why is it so? Is it so easy to fix? Why is it still there? So, are there any specific common mistakes people make in their checkout flow that should not be there for any website at all?
Mistakes are always a fun term because there's typically a tact or a stratagem or an intention behind it. Some of it is literally, or we have spoken to some people before, and they say, well, we have to do this. This is how our backend works. So we do understand that for any given site out there, there are reasons why this information is being asked for, this is being presented, or being strong armed into a position sounds a bit aggressive, but it is that they have limited choices. So the pitfalls, perhaps that might be a slightly friendlier way of putting it, is not leaning into these optimization availabilities. So going way back to, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, we first started talking, when we are talking about those optimizations and cutting down the number of form fields. First name and last name, that can be condensed. It sounds like a small thing, but surprisingly impactful. How I refer to myself is a single entity. It's Rebecca Hugo. That's my name. I don't think first name Rebecca, last name Hugo. So how much can we optimize from those available fields? What fields can we default collapse to make sure that users are benefiting from? So not leaning into helping. Same principle with what can we pre-fill? What can we help out the user completing? What can we avoid the possibility of errors for? Spoke about mobile, spoke about, keep talking with my finger, spoke about possibilities of struggling to type in, making those common mistakes. User address lookup features. Start typing in 295. Oh, look, that's the rest of my address. I can recognize that. I've now saved 4 possible entry failures and removed 4 elements of stress almost for myself. What information can be saved realistically? One of my favorite guidelines, this sounds very silly, but I do love this guideline to pieces. It's number 555 if you ever do happen to be part of BAMR Premium. But it's not making the user type things more than they have to. So it's not erasing unnecessary data. And I always get this little moment whenever I come across it. But for example, say you've got a set of accordions for credit card field, radio button 1, credit card field. Radio button 2, select third-party payment for PayPal. Radio button 3, maybe it's Klarna. I've started typing in my credit card information. That's all in there. I can't save the page because it's going to pay. But I've changed my mind. It's like, oh, I've got my PayPal login. I'm going to switch. So you've changed your radio button. And then you realize that you forgot your password because, of course, you have. If I click back into the credit card, all my information is erased. There's no reason for it. And it sounds like such a silly thing to get attached to. And I've attached to this guideline for years. But it's those moments of, well, you didn't have to do that. You could have helped, and yet this availability or this option wasn't. And I gush about my checkout guidelines because I do love them so. But we have those moments of, why aren't you helping me? The site can do these things. It can make life easier, and yet it's not. And it comes again all the way back to obvious isn't always obvious. We're not expecting someone to do that. Or I did this with testing years and years and years ago when I was doing quality control. Quite a lot of the time we test for the best case scenario. We test for success. We don't click around the site trying to break it. Users aren't intentionally going out there trying to break a site, but they are changing their minds. They are being erroneous. They are being fallible. So we need to test for those eventualities as well, and test for those non-obvious moments, which sounds a little cliche, but there we have it. So that it's not always happening. I'm seeing less and less sites do it, which is great, but sites still are. So those pitfalls of not helping the user, not optimizing for the user, not doing what a computer can do, which is intentionally save time, repeat information, save information, etc. So those common pitfalls, and there are loads more available on some of Bainard's blogs, but those would be my initial off the cuff moments.
Awesome. So next question might sound silly to you, and it's quite related to what I've already asked, but I was still going to ask it. Are there any specific guidelines or tips that you want to share with somebody who is building their website for the first time, like someone, the new website owner? Are there any best practices that you want to lay out for them for their checkout page or checkout flow?
First things first, nothing is obvious. Nothing is a silly question. Yeah. Only silly question is a question unasked, as they used to tell me at school at the very least. So again, this is what it comes down to. If you are brand new into e-commerce, if you are brand new into these moments, if you've outsourced it, all of these questions are completely valid. Annoyingly, there isn't necessarily that straight cut response. So I can't necessarily say, yeah, these are the 10 secrets to a good checkout, because I know this is very taboo in the UX industry, but it does depend. Where are the current fail points? What situation is the site currently in? What is it selling? What industry is it part of? Who is it targeting, etc.? So what I can confidently say is, do look at the available analytics that any site does have. And if a site doesn't have analytics, go off and get them. And it's not just basic click-through rates, it's shove them all on there. Get a real understanding of how the user is experiencing the site, perceiving the site, interacting with the site. Lifetime value sales, customer value sales, etc. Get all these numbers out there. But when we're looking at this checkout flow, like earlier you mentioned about a site being comfortable with being able to, with the person being able to feel comfortable trusting the website. Some of that does come down to how that website is presented. Are things clear? Are they buggy? Are they transparent? We spoke about costs up front. We spoke about breakdowns of those availabilities. We spoke about not hiding things. So there are all of these elements of, are you giving the information to the user as they need it? Yes or no? So it's a very broad kind of moment there, but it is integral. So 1. 2, are you making the site unnecessarily complicated? So when we talk again about those, minimizing those form fields, are the labels accurate? Is it clear that I need to fill out this over something else? So leaning into those form usability guideline designs. And then this section, again, I love it because it's me, is error recovery. If a user fails, which we are likely to do, what happens next? Is a user able to recover from that? Is the site helping them? Is the user being alerted in the right ways? These are typically low frequency, high severity guidelines within Bainard's database, because whilst the average user isn't necessarily experiencing the error because they're traveling on just fine, a user that does experience a particular error has to abandon a site. So that is a single average order value lost. That is a customer lifetime value lost because the site isn't doing the smart thing by offering the information they have. So 1, again, look at your analytics. Where are those common pitfalls available for the user? If a user is continually dropping off at shipping, look at that shipping page. Does the shipping page need to be optimized? Is the cost not upfront? Is the speed not upfront? Is something being hidden? Can someone not see something? If the drop-off page is happening at payment, Is there sufficient payment methods? Is 555 not being highlighted well enough? Is the user losing their information? Are the user struggling? User information, is the user not understanding what needs to be filled out? Are they being daunted by 16 form fields presented to them all at once, and so on? So once the commonality or once these prevalence drop off pieces, etc., look at those analytics, work out where, concentrate on bringing that up. On average, when we do talk with clients at Baymard, we aren't necessarily saying make checkout the best. Of course, it's important, but it's make everything averagely really solid and then start sprinkling. You have to have a good cake before you frost it. Otherwise, you've just got really tasty frosting and a kind of not great cake. There's a similar principle here. Everything should be consistently good and then great. So concentrate on bringing everything up to scratch, that foundational aspect. So, yeah, concentrate on your current failings, bring them up, then continue to just iterate and tidy and bring those other areas up more neatly. We've got all the individual guidelines available for any given site out there. I can't say do this one specifically because I don't know what their site is doing suboptimally specifically.
Awesome, Rebecca. So this has been one of the value added and completely gold fitted episodes so far. We have discussed a lot of great things today, and it's an awesome moment to have you here. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for listening so far, guys. Uh, this is definitely a value added episode, and Rebecca has shared some of the greatest insights on the checkout page so far. So, if you know somebody who is an D2C e commerce owner, and if you share this episode with them, they would definitely thank you for doing this. And thank you once again, Rebecca, for joining us and sharing these valuable inputs. Stay tuned, guys. We keep bringing new episodes every week. Uh, Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening from. Thanks once again for joining. And thank you, Rebecca, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's great being here.